Hello everyone, this is Drupal 8's multilingual APIs, building for the entire world. My name is López. In this talk we are going to talk about code. If you are interested in how to do multilingual sites from the site building perspective, there are some talks that we did in the past in Drupal8multilingual.org. You can find videos there. You can find the slides. You can even find a 3-hour workshop guide for setting up a multilingual website and how to create that and all the features that Drupal 8 allows you to do. And there's also a multilingual distribution for testing, so you can find like a lot of resources on Drupal 8 multilingual from the site building point of view. But here we are going to talk about the code, about the APIs. Okay, and this doesn't work. Yeah, so as I said, I'm López. I'm Peñasquito on Drupal.org and IRC. And I've been a Drupal 8 multilingual initiative contributor since Drupal Dev Days Barcelona. And I work for Lingotech, which is a company that provides translation services on top of different platforms, and of course, Drupal. So I'm talking here about what happened in the multilingual initiative that made these APIs possible, and this is a work of a lot of people. More than 1,600 people contributed to this, so thanks all for that. And who has built Drupal 7 multilingual sites here in the room? Yeah, half of the room. So in Drupal 7 multilingual, in Drupal 7, Drupal core was not really aware of languages. So we had Drupal core, and the Drupal core had the locale module, and the locale module provides you the ability to translate your site, and like the interface of your site, and to have like different languages. And then you are installing different modules and adding languages, and for each of them you have to download a PO file for importing them. So you need the localization update module, and if you have like 4 languages and 10 country modules, you have to manually download 40 PO files for importing the translations from the community on your site. And for speeding up this process, you can use this module, localization update, that allows you to automate this. Then you want to translate your nodes, and you use the content translation module. But you also want to translate your views or your taxonomy. So you need the I-89 suite, which is a suite of lots of modules for translating terms, web forms, whatever. But then you want to translate the title of your site. So you need the variable module for doing that. And then you maybe want to make a business with your site, so you install Drupal Commerce, and you find out that products are translated with the entity translation module. So you have like you end up with more than 40 modules only for translating your site. And then you have like different options for doing some translations, like you want to translate your nodes, you may want to use content translation or entity translation, or you want to translate your terms, and you have the I-89 suite and the entity translation. So you have like different options. So it's really easy to make your site really complex, and then when you have to edit something, you don't find where is it. And also, if you want to translate your titles of your products, you need the title module, so there's even more. So in Drupal 8, this approach, working from this context, In Drupal 8, we put language. Like in Drupal 7, it was an afterthought. In Drupal 8, the multilingual initiative was one of the first that I started, and the purpose was like making this really easier for site builders and for developers to build multilingual sites. So for that, we have 4 different pillars in Drupal 8, which translates to 4 different modules. In Drupal core, the first one is the language module, which allows you to associate a language to your data, whatever data you are putting on the site, and it's not about multilingual only. Like you may want to have a site which is only in English, but you know that there's like you have content coming from different sources, and you want to track the language of this data, no matter if you are actually a multilingual site or not. Then we have the interface translation module that allows you to translate the interface itself. These 2 modules are what in Drupal 7 was the locale module. So now they are like more isolated. So one is for assigning data, language to your data, and the other one is for translating the interface. So you can have, as I said before, you can track the language of a monolingual site. And this module improved a lot, and you can download the translations from localized-drupal.org automatically, so you don't need a country module for that. Then we have the content translation module, which, no matter of the name, it has nothing to do with the content translation module in Drupal 7. It's more like the entity translation module. This means that we don't have two nodes, like we don't create 2 node entities for 2 different translations. We have a field-based approach. So you have only 1 node, and all the translations are part of that node. And this module also provides the user interface for translating your content. And it's not only about nodes, it's about any entity on your system. And then we have the config translation module. The configuration management changed a lot in Drupal 8. And it's really powerful now. And from the beginning, we made sure that there was a way of translating your configuration. So you can translate your views, or you can translate your content types. You can translate everything on your system, and also your title, your site name, or your forms. So let's start for the first one, the language module. So we are going to see the APIs that the language module provides. So first, in Drupal core, even without the language module, we have a language manager. So we can call the Drupal language manager method, and we get the language manager service, which allows you to make operations about languages. And it's useful even if you have a monolingual site, like you want to know which languages you have on your site. And you can track the language of your data. But if you install the language module, instead of getting the language manager service, you will get the configurable language manager service, which implements the same interface, so it's somehow transparent. If you're building your modules, it's transparent if you are in a multilingual site or not. You just call the same service. And this service provides a method, get languages, so you can get the language that are installed on your site. If you don't install the locale, if you don't install the language module, this method will return 3 languages. You will have English, which is the default. And in Drupal 7, we had one special language, which is the not specified one, the UND that you used to see a lot on your templates. And this was really confusing to users and developers. So now we wanted to double the confusion, and we have 2 different special languages, not specified and not applicable. So when should you use each of them? Not specified means that we don't know the language of this data. Maybe we are importing from a different source. I don't know, we may want to import tweets from Twitter automatically, and we don't know the language of these tweets. It makes sense to have a language, but we don't know which language the data is in. Then we have the not applicable, which is for content that doesn't make sense to have a language. Like maybe you have an image, and this image has no text, so if you have a picture of the seaside, you don't really need to know, there's nothing about language, so it's not applicable. So if you install the language module, you can enable different languages, and you can configure them, and these are stored as entities, as configuration entities, which we talk about it later. And as any other configuration entity in the system, you can export them to YAML files, so you can deploy languages. Like if you have a staging environment and you have a production environment and you are adding new languages to your site, you can perform that in your staging side and your development side, and then deploy them like any other configuration in your system. And these configurable languages have a property which is locked, which means if you can edit those languages. So in some interfaces, it won't show the locked languages, like it doesn't make sense. So yeah, about languages. And the language you add, of course, are not locked. So for dealing with languages, we can create the languages using the API. There are 95 standard languages provided in Drupal, but you can create your own. This is useful. Maybe you have like a Spanish from Spain, Spanish for Mexico, and you want to track them separately, so you can create your languages, your custom languages, like in Drupal 7. And if you want to use the standard languages, you have a method called create from lang code, and this allows you to have like the label of the language and anything, so you only need to use the lang code and save, and your language is set up on your system. And as there are entities, you can load them, and you can delete them, you can edit them, you can perform any operation on them using the configurable language class. If you are so you are coding in a page and you don't know the current language that has been negotiated for the visitor, you have the language manager service has a get current language method, which returns the language object that the visitor is building. So you can use this language for whatever you need there. So the next one is the interface translation module. So in Drupal 7, we had the T function, and we have the same in Drupal 8. The talk is over. Let's go. No. So apparently it's the same, but internally it's really different, and you probably shouldn't be using that. You can use it, but you don't really need to. So let's see an example. Maybe you have a form in your site for the administrator to send emails to some users, and you want to send these emails in the preferred language of these users. So for that, in your page, when you are building this logic, you need to get the user from the system. So you call the user functions for getting the user you are sending the email to. And you need to know the preferred language for this user. So you need to call the configuration subsystem for getting this information. And then you want to actually translate the email. So you need the translation functionality. So your logic will use these three elements. In Drupal 8, there's a new concept, which is called dependency injection, which actually reverse the direction of these arrows. So instead of your logic calling the configuration system and the user system, you will have these services injected in your class, probably in the constructor. There are other ways, but the most common case is in the constructor of your objects. And you will get the configuration system, the user system, and the translation system. So you can call functions on them. And if you want to switch to a completely different translation subsystem, you can swap them off. Or your user or whatever. You may want to have, I don't know, you may have a module that loads the users from external database because you are building some integration. So this allows you to abstract your logic from whatever is in the other subsystems. And this also makes your code more easy to test. So it's a great feature to have. So why I'm telling this? Because instead of calling the T function in Drupal 8, we should call the this_t function. And this means that we have injected the translation service in our class, and we have the T method in our class itself. But we don't have to implement that for every class in the system. So there's a trait, a string translation trait, that provides you with the T function and already knows about the string translation service, so you don't really need to inject it or anything. You just use this trait, and it will be available for you. So instead of calling T, you will call this T, and if you do that in Drupal 7, you get the string back translated. In Drupal 8, we don't have that. What we get back is an object, which is a translatable markup object. And as this is an object, you can call methods on it. So you can get option lang code will return the lang code to which language you are translating this string. And calling T doesn't actually translate the string itself, because we are trying to delay this until the last possible moment. So maybe you have you are creating their code that is creating strings, and it's calling the T function, and then you have a form alter, and you are removing these strings. In that case, these strings will not be actually translated, like you are throwing them away, because we are doing that only when we are rendering them. So if we call in this object, we will have like a method for, we can actually force the translation to happen, or we can get the original text, so for whatever reason we need that. It's like an object with quite a lot of information. In the same way, in Drupal 7, we had the format plural method, which is gone. So in the case of T, you shouldn't use it, but it's there. Format plural was actually removed, and you have the this format plural method, and it's exactly the same that the T function. So if you use the trait, you will have it, and it will return objects, so you can perform operations on them. So let's see in the front end what we have. In Drupal 7, we had Drupal T and Drupal format plural from JavaScript in the same way that we have from the back for the backend, and it doesn't really change compared to Drupal 7. So in this case, it's mostly the same. For templates, we have TWIG now. So it's TWIG. It's a templating system that is common in other technologies. So people, front-end developers, may be really aware of it before it came in Drupal 8. And for translating strings there, you can use the trans filter, as in this first example. Or you can use the trans tag. So the filter is if you have a short string, maybe you want to use that. If you have a longer string, which may have placeholders or context, you should use the trans tag because it's more readable. So in this case, we have a string submitted by, and we have a placeholder author name and the date. So this will be replaced by variable values here. So for your menus, in Drupal 7, we had hook menu, and there you have the title of your, like we have hook menu actually was about the routing, like which this URL goes to this method. We have the information like the title, description. We had the links in the menus. We had all the information in the same function. Here we splitted it in Drupal 8, and actually it's in YAML files. So when you define your route, your menu links, you will have an ID for your menu link, and then you have the title and the description. In your hook menu, you shouldn't be using T, because these results are cached. So instead of that, the Drupal will do it for you, so you just put the string there and that's it. Here we have YAML files. We cannot call any functions. So there are special tags like title and description that we will know that these are strings that will be rendered. And there are tools like the POTX module that will extract those from the YAML files. So you can actually, this is used in localized Drupal.org. So if you download translations from there, and the titles from the core modules will be translated. So this is about the interface translation module APIs, and it allows you to translate your interface strings from English to any other language. So as you see, as in Drupal 7, when you are coding, your strings should be in English. About content translation module. So when we are creating our own entities, we are seeing here Node.php in Drupal core. For allowing the users to translate them, it's as easy. We have the content entity annotation in your class, where we have metadata about your entity. And there we have a translatable tag. So you can say translatable true, and this will allow your users your site builders to configure if your content, if your entity is translatable or not. For that, you need to have a language field. So there's a lang code entity key here that maps to a field which will store the language. And if you are, so then you need to have a base field for this language. So this is from content entity base, which probably you should be extending if you are creating your own entities. And here, in the base field definitions method in content entity base already checks if there's a lang code key. It will create the lang code field for you. So you just need to say, I'm translatable, and this is the name of my language field, and that's it. This allows your site builders to configure translatability on your content entities. So this is not making your entities translatable. This is making your site builders able of marking them as translatable in the interface. So by default, they won't be translatable. So yeah, when you have your entity, you have your base field definition methods. If you call the parent base field definition, it will create the language for you. And for which fields are translatable by default, you have the set translatable method in the base field definitions, objects. So when you create your fields, like here, the title, we are saying that it's a string with this label, it's required, and we set translatable to true. This is also not making them translatable is just making them by default, so the users can actually change the settings according to the site. So about your fields, if you are creating your own field types, how can you make them translatable? There's nothing you need to do. So if you create your fields, they will be translatable by default. But you may want to extend this further. Like you may want to divide into subfields and say how you want to translate those. So this example is the image field type. Here we have a column groups tag. And we define here that we have the file, which contains different columns about the data you are saving, which is the target ID of the file, the width of the image, and the height of the image. And then we have other properties like the alternative text or the title, which is not here. So in this case, but for saying the defaults for your field and allowing the user to configure it with more granularity, you just define the translatable true in the column group that you want to translate by default. Again, the site builder in the config translation interface can change this. So how we load this data? So we have, in every entity, we will have a load method. In the same way, when we load an object, a content entity object, we have the getTranslation method, and we can pass a lang code, and we will get the same object, but with this translation set up, so we can call any, we can print any value from this. If we don't really, like here we are saying getTranslation Hungarian, if we don't really know which language we should be rendering in, we can use the current negotiated language in the page, and we have in the entity repository class, we have the getTranslation from context. We pass the object, and we will get back the translated object for the current language. So the first case is if you are, like in the sample we said before, if you are sending emails to users in their own language, you want to load the default language for this user and call the getTranslation method. If you are displaying something in the screen, you don't really need to get the language for the user, you just use the getTranslation from context. So in the same way, we have methods for getUntranslated, for getting the source entity, the original entity that was translated. We have the language method for getting the language object for this entity. GetTranslation languages give you all the language objects that this content has been translated to. And we have hash translation. We have APIs for adding a translation or for removing them. So any operation we need to do in your translation, your content translation can be done from the API. But as you may know, Views is in core now. So you have a really powerful API for building your sites, but probably you can do anything with Views. In Views, language has been integrated too. As you know, Views is a module that allows you to, it has two functions. One is querying your system for getting data with some filters and then display them. So we have language integrated into the queries and also the rendering. So you can filter by language and then decide in which language you want to show that. So you can do give me show all the nodes in German, but show them in the original language. So this is something you can do. Like maybe you are building an admin interface for a set of users that use a specific language, and they need to know which content they need to translate. You can do. These are not tied. Like you can do like any combination you need for the query and for the rendering. So then we go to the last pillar, config translation. So your configuration is in YAML files. Your default configuration is in YAML files. So in this case, we have the maintenance YAML file, and this is how this configuration will look like. You have the message, and you have the line code. So you have the line code of the strings in this configuration. These are like in Drupal 8, we have data types and we have schemas. So we have to define how our configuration looks like the structure of this configuration. And you have typed data. So you can say that some string is a text, and this will mean that it's translatable. And you have your line code, so the language of your configuration is saved with your configuration. So there are two different kinds of configurations. One is a config object. This means that it's a unique configuration data on your site, like the site name of your site. You only have one site name, maybe in two different languages, but you have one. And then you have like your content types. These are, you can have many of them, you can add them. Those are config entities. So in your config objects, when you are defining your configuration, you say that this is a config object, and this will mean that you will have a line code. And in your strings, you will say this is a text, so this will mean that you have a translatable string here. And the config translation module will build the UI for you for translating your configuration and everything based on these schemas. So when we export our configuration to YAML files and we have translation, this will be exported to a language folder, and you will have different folders for each language with the language code. So in this case, we have the Hungarian translation of the maintenance of the system maintenance object. So we will have the same file with the strings in different language in this folder. So if you have multiple sites, you will have multiple folders. How we load our configuration from the API? So we have the Drupal config method, and this will load the system maintenance configuration, and you get the message, and this will apply all the translation, all the overrides, like language are actually config overrides. So the Drupal config object takes your configuration, applies any overrides you need to, like maybe you have something on your settings PHP, or you have some module that is altering this, or you have the languages itself. So if you call Drupal config, you will get the configuration in your system with all the overrides applied. So calling this in a page that a Hungarian visitor is seeing will get the Hungarian string. But maybe you want to get the configuration in a given language. So for that, we need the language manager, and there we can call the get config override language. This will get the current language that you are seeing, so you can save that. And then you can call set config override language with a proper language object. And after doing that, any configuration you load will be in that language. So you can call Drupal config system maintenance. This will give you the system maintenance object in Hungarian, no matter of the language of the visitor. You can perform any operations on it. So maybe you are sending these emails we talked about before. And after you are done, you should set the config override to the original language you had. So this is for loading your configuration in a concrete language. So there are other methods for loading your configuration. The next one is config factory. You can call the config factory and get the table. This means that we want to get the original configuration, and you can edit them, because the Drupal config method will give you an immutable object, like you cannot modify. It's like it's not an array, but it's like a silly object that you cannot really perform any operations on. If you call getEditable, you will get an object that you can actually modify, and no overrides will apply. So in this case, you will see always the configuration in its original language. And if you want to actually edit the translations themselves, you have the language. In the language manager service, you have get language config override method. You pass the lang code you want to load and the ID of your config object, and you can set the properties and save them or whatever. So in this case, you are editing the override itself, the language override itself. So in the case of content translation, we can translate from any language to any other language. In interface translation, we can always translate from English to any other language. Our content or translations in the content translation module will be like intelligent objects. You can get the translation, checking which translations are available. In the case of the config, you can translate from any language to any other language, but these are like damarized, so you are actually like setting values, and then these values are overriding other values. So it's not as it's really powerful, but it's not. You don't have like proper intelligent objects. So again, this is the result of the work of a lot of people through the years. So again, thanks them for working on this, and thanks to Gabor Hoitzi, the Drupal 8 multilingual initiative lead, which actually helped a lot with these slides too. So that was it. I think we have like 4 minutes for questions. Thank you.
Does anyone has a question for Peñasco? Everything is clear, Sim?
Yeah, I was really clear, or no one get anything. There's the two extremes, yeah.
So thanks.
Okay. If you are shy now and you have questions later, I'll be around all day. Not tomorrow, but today I'll be around, so don't hesitate to contact me. So thank you for coming. Enjoy the conference.